Okay, just so that you know that. So for those of you new to CFE, we're a Chicago-based education nonprofit. Oh, I'm going to try to mute some folks. Everyone could mute themselves. That would be awesome. Kind of running the show by myself, so we'll see how things move along. So for those of you new to the organization, we're a Chicago-based education nonprofit that has focused on supporting Chicago public school educators through grants and fellowships for almost 40 years. CFE uplifts and empowers our local educators and their work in an effort to support fair and equitable student experiences. So we value the importance of self-examination and the power of self-reflection to drive action, which you'll see a lot of reflected here tonight. We know how important both of those are when educating Chicago's diverse student population. And we are just so thrilled to have these fellows here tonight to present their work. It has been, as most everyone, if not all of you on the call know, another very challenging school year in many ways. We're grateful you decided to spend part of your evening supporting these dedicated, reflective educators who are on the very, very tail end of their school year and have worked so incredibly hard both in the school and in this program. So we're thrilled to have them as part of CFE. A few quick housekeeping items before we get started. So we really, really encourage audience question participation, not during the presentations, but after. So if you do have a question that comes to mind during a presentation, please directly chat Kate Carter. So she has Q&A in front of her name on her, she's our participant Q&A, Kate Carter. So directly send a question to her in the chat box. If you want to wait till the end of the presentation, that's fine too. You can use the raise your hand function, or you can just pop it into the chat box for everyone to see. Kate will be monitoring those and she'll be facilitating the Q&A portion for each of our presenters tonight. The other thing is that we ask you to complete a feedback form for each presenter. Everyone, if you can, complete a feedback form for each of our 4 presenters tonight. I will pop that link in the chat box after every presentation. You just continue to use the same feedback form and just submit one for each presenter. So tonight we are showcasing the work of 4 of our ARLI fellows. We hope you enjoy their inspiring accounts of student research and discovery. Before we move into the presentations, however, I would like to hand it off to Deb Moretsky, who's in her 2nd year of leading the ARLI program. And Deb, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah. Welcome everybody tonight. Again, I hope you're all inside, staying cool in this very hot weather. I think it's a wonderful evening that we have ahead of us, and I'm looking forward to hearing from our final 4 ARLI fellows tonight very much. The ARLI program is a rigorous process. Some of you may be familiar with it. Candidates apply in the summer. They go through an interview process, writing samples. We select our fellows, and then they work very hard all year on doing research about the topic that they're interested in and conducting their own research in the classroom, sharing that with their ARLI colleagues and producing a paper and doing this presentation. And as Sarah had said, it has been an incredibly challenging year, even more so than last year. So we had the year that was challenging because of COVID and the pandemic and the impact of that on many of the students that teachers had to deal with. And I made a few comments like this last week, and I'll just revisit them for the moment tonight. It was challenging in lots of different ways in terms of some of the things that are going on right now in the country and the way people are reacting to public education. There's an awful lot of teachers being told what they can teach or what they can say, and school board meetings getting crazy and things like that. Fortunately, a lot of that we've avoided in this particular area. And the last meeting of the year that we sat together in person was very shortly after the shootings in Texas. And we were all very sobered by that and took some time in the last meeting to talk about that. So there's a lot to being a teacher in the best of years. And what we're seeing now is that there's even more going on in terms of the expectations that we place on them and the support or lack thereof that we give to them. So I guess I would just make one kind of a plea that it is easy to say that we support teachers and we support public education, but if there's ways that you feel comfortable going forward in terms of turning that belief into some sort of action that really is supportive of your fellow teachers, think about whether you can do that or not. And we are very glad to have you here tonight to support them in their with their presentations. I'm also very glad to have Kate Carter here again, handling the questions and the answers and the technology. She's been wonderfully supportive to ARLI. She is a STEM teacher and an instructional coach at the University of Chicago Charter School in Woodlawn, and also the garden coordinator there. And she has spent 2 years as an ARLI fellow herself and 2 years as a consultant / significant helper to ARLI advisors, last year being the year I was able to work with her. So thank you again for being here, and I appreciate it very much. And the first ARLI fellow that I have the privilege to introduce is the fellow who served as senior fellow this year, Andy DeVivo. He was a terrific senior fellow, very supportive to his colleagues. He is a third and fourth grade math and science teacher at Tarkington. His project is called I want to read this, Self-Paced Blended Instruction in the Fourth Grade Math Classroom, and you will get a wonderful idea of exactly what that means. He did fabulous work, he got fabulous results, and we're excited to hear what he has to say about his work tonight. So thank you all. I'm going to hand that over to Andy.
Thanks, Deb. I appreciate it. And thank you all for being here. I'm very excited to present my research. So, is that okay? Okay, wonderful. So let me put presentation mode. Okay. Awesome. So, thank you. My name is Andy DeVivo, as Deb said, and my presentation is called At Your Own Speed, Self-Paced Blended Instruction in the Fourth Grade Classroom. I teach at Tarkington School of Excellence, which is in the Marquette Park neighborhood of Chicago. We have 919 students, kindergarten through eighth grade. 94% of them are low-income students, 37% are English language learners, and 78.6% of the population are Hispanic students, and 20.7% are Black students. I chose to focus on my homeroom for this presentation. Here we are on the great lawn out back during our reading day. I had 25 students. Let me just move this bar. 25 students, 17 girls, so a lot of girls, 8 boys. And when I took their initial math levels at the start of the year, I was very curious to see kind of where they had been after the pandemic and after learning at home for a year. I had 3 students test at a first grade level. This is in fourth grade. 6 students at a second grade level, 13 students at a third grade level, and 2 students were only at a fourth grade level. So I really didn't have that many students on grade level coming into this year. One of my students transferred in mid-year. And so I want to think a little bit about how we educate students in America. And so as most of you know, having gone through the American education system, we educate students in groups, right, in batches. So depending on their age, they go through the education system all together, and their goal was to get to the end of the line by the time they're 18 and to move on to the workforce. Students really don't have a choice necessarily when they learn, at what time. When the bell rings, they go in. When the bell rings, they come out. And they often don't have a choice whether they learn in small groups or big groups or even on their own. And so the question then is, what if they don't move along the conveyor belt at the same speed as someone else? Do we let them get off the conveyor belt and move a little bit slower? Do we support them in that? Or do we kind of just push them ahead in hopes that they'll catch up as they're moving with their peers? There really isn't maybe an answer to that question yet, and I think different teachers do different things to help their students. Now, at the start of this year, I think I chose to push all my students ahead together. I said, you know, we're all at different levels, but we're just going to move forward because that seemed like the way that I was taught how to teach. And about 4 weeks into teaching with that whole group model, that model of pushing everyone together, I wrote this reflection. I said, today's students were really on task and working, and there was a lot of learning that was getting done, but I, as a teacher, had few quality interactions with my students. There was a lot of walking by and checking their work quickly, and there were even some higher achieving students who I didn't even get a chance to check in on. And that just made me feel, not great, that I wasn't even talking to some of my students during an entire day. But I kept going. I said, let's keep trying this. I'm going to get better. It's going to get easier. But then 4 weeks later after that, I had another reflection. I said, most days, most students don't even finish all the independent work. There either isn't enough time given for them to do the work from myself, or they don't work at a pace that would allow them to finish the work. Remember, a lot of my students were entering school below grade level, and they just couldn't work at a speed that they needed to be at doing this grade level content so that they all could move together. And so based on these reflections, I knew I had to find a new model of instruction that would support my students learning grade level content, because they were in 4th grade. And so after some research, it led me to learning about a new model, a model that is called self-paced blended learning. And so I wanted to see, what happens when 4th graders learn with this self-paced blended learning instructional model. And I wanted to also have this emphasis on building a learning community. This is a kind of model that some high schools use, some colleges use, but I thought maybe it could be used at the 4th grade level. And to help me along that way, I developed some sub-questions. I said, what's going to happen to students' grade level mathematics achievement when they use this instructional model? How are they going to interact with their peers as they show mastery of the content? And how are my interactions with my students going to change? Because that was something that was really important to me that I wasn't having in those first 8 weeks of whole group teaching. So to help you understand what is a self-paced blended learning model, because it took me a minute to understand that too, I'm going to have a couple of my students explain to you in their own words. So hopefully you can hear this video. If you can't, just someone yell at me, please.
Hello, 4th graders and teachers. We are Saeed and Jasmine from 4th grade, and we will teach you how to use your map, tracker, and lessons or activities, how it's called at the end. So we will start with the map. These blue activities are activities that you have to do. These yellow activities are activities that you should do after activities. These red activities are activities that you couldn't do if you want to.
Okay, so here you can find your name. And let's say in activity 1, if you have it green, that means it's correct. If it's yellow, that means there's something wrong in it or it's not complete. If it's red or just simply white, that means that, well, it's not have been done.
And so let me dive a little bit deeper in. Let me make sure. Okay, represent. There we go. Into what is this model that my students are talking about. So self-paced blended. First, let's talk about blended. Blended instruction really just means instruction where students learn with videos and also with in-person instruction. So I would be in the classroom with them, providing them in-person instruction, but I would also have them use videos to learn along the way. Here's an example of a video that students might watch on a given day. Hello, 4th graders. Welcome to lesson 15A. We are cruising along into division now. Today we're going to be working on the strategy of the area model. Yes, incredible. Area models are also in division. I know a lot of us love them in multiplication, and hopefully you're going to enjoy them in division as well. Okay. So that is something that they would watch, and obviously there'd be a lot more instruction, but that was just the introduction. And so learning through that, they also have this other part of it, which is the self-paced structure. Students can learn at their own speed. So in a given day, I would have students on all these different lessons. Some would be working in small groups on one lesson, some on another one. And they know which lesson to move to next because they had this map for every one of their standards. And so once they master a lesson, they can move to the next one. As you heard Zaid and Emily and Jasmine say, the blue activities are activities that they have to do. Those are standards-based activities. The yellow activities are ones that are going to support them, but are not mandatory. And the red activities are activities that can challenge them and move a little bit beyond the standard, maybe into the 5th grade level. And so how do they know when to move on to the next activity? So once they learn an activity, they take something that's called a mastery check. And the mastery check really shows that they are fully understanding the content that they are engaging with. And so if I look at their mastery check and I say, you got it, that's 100% correct, it has to be 100% correct, I will give them a C next to their name. And they know that they can move on to the next activity. If they have a P here, as you can see, there's some Ps, that just means they made a mistake. And we've really normalized mistakes. They know, okay, I'm gonna go see Mr. DeVivo, he's gonna help me figure out what my mistake is. And then I'm gonna take another mastery check and try it again and see if I can show mastery on this activity. And then eventually move forward. So it really is wonderful that students are moving at different speeds and becoming proficient at the standards at a speed that makes sense to them. So all of this is based also on the modern classroom approach, which you can find more information here too at modernclassrooms.org. So how did I collect data along the way? I used 4 different types of data collection. I created a tracker that allowed me to track my interactions with my students. I gave students a survey 3 times a year to learn a little bit more about their beliefs and what they thought was going on in the classroom. I had them use a Google form to share different interactions they were having with their peers on a given day. And then I also wrote a lot of observations in my teacher journal, almost daily, about what was going on in the math classroom. And that really allowed me to reflect and analyze different situations that were happening in the classroom. And so let's talk about what actually happened. This is the exciting stuff. First, what happened to their grade level achievement? Well, their quarterly grades, which, one second, there we go. So their quarterly grades, in quarter 1, we were only using this whole group instructional method. So I was pushing them all at the same pace to go forward. And here you can see their grades aren't horrible. They mostly averaged around a low B. And then as we start to implement this self-paced instructional model with the videos and the blended instruction, you can see that in quarter 2, their grades slightly increase. So in quarter 2, they had about half the time with whole group, and then we switched to this new model about halfway through the quarter. And then in quarter 3, you can see their grades go much higher. And so those yellow circles represent their quarter 3 grades when they're using that entirely self-paced blended instructional model, moving at their own speed, working a lot with their peers, working a lot with me. And so as we kind of go through the averages, in quarter 1, students were averaging around 83% a quarter, and in quarter 2, about 89%, and then in quarter 3, about 94%. So their grades grew by about 10 points over the course of the year from the change of model. This particular data is what I was most excited to see at the end of the year. At the start of the year, I asked students to choose a sentence that best described them and their survey. Either I think I'm good at math or I don't think I'm good at math. Now at the beginning of the year survey, the majority, or 43.5%, said, I think I'm good at math, while the majority of students said, I do not think I'm good at math. But just a week ago, when I gave them their end of the year survey, 86.4% of students said, I think I'm good at math. And that makes me so excited, thinking that they are moving into 5th grade with this belief that they are good at math, that they can do math at a 4th grade level confidently. And I hope that that will lead them to more success in the 5th grade level as well. And those 3 students who said, I don't think I'm good at math, I'm not giving up on them yet. I've told their teacher who they are, so hopefully he can support them in the next year as well. Now, this next question I was most curious to investigate with, because with this new model of learning, I knew that there would be kind of 2 groups of students. There would be students who took this self-paced, move at your own speed type of learning and kind of like blaze through the map and learn super fast and be able to move at the speed they've always wanted to move at without waiting for everyone else. And I was curious if those really fast achieving students would then go back and support their peers who are maybe moving a little bit slower. I just wondered if that would happen. But I also knew there would be students who typically could never help a friend because they were always trying to catch up to the rest of their peers. The class was always moving so fast for them that they never really felt like they could help someone else because they were always just trying to help themselves. I wondered if they moved at their own speed, could they then be a helper for someone else and deepen their own understanding? And so let's see what happened. So in the beginning of the year survey, most students said that they receive help from their class, from a classmate about 1 day a week, which is good. And 18% said every day. And then when I asked them, how often do you help another student in the math class? It was encouraging to think that most of them thought they helped someone either 2, 3, or 4 days a week. So already at the start of the year, there was kind of this belief that students can help each other, they can have this interaction within class. And already 68% of students felt comfortable receiving help from another student in the math class. So that was great to see. Now, at the end of the year survey, again, what I found encouraging to see was that the majority of students felt that they received help from a classmate either every day or 2, 3, or 4 days a week. So it really felt like that learning community was established based on these peer interactions. And so I'm not sure if that's because students were either moving so fast or able to move slower, but there were a lot of peer interactions. And also, again, the majority of students, 68%, were either were helping another student in the math class either every day or 2, 3, or 4 days a week based on their own answers. And what was most encouraging perhaps was that now 91% of students feel comfortable receiving help in a math class from another student. And that to me really talks about the learning community that was created in the classroom using this self-paced blended instruction. And so I just want to show you an example of what it looks like when one student helps another student. This is Melissa helping Emily.
I mean 6. So 5, 3, and which one? Which one should we take for? Like 8 or 4? 4. Well, what will be 4 is you subtract it. Okay. And why should it be 13?
Because there's a 1
Well, that's what everyone thinks, but no, it's 11. Because look, 8. What's 8 plus 3? And it's just like doing the inner model. Like draw 8 and like draw another model. 8 and get it.
So I think the most important moment of this interaction is when Melissa says to Emily, why should it be 13? And notice that when Emily says, or notice that then she says, that's what everyone thinks, as if to say, it's okay that you're wrong. Everyone has thought that. Like, you're not the only one that's thinking that. And that to me is showing just a great example of how we're just normalizing the mistakes that students are making, and students are kind of confirming everyone's identity as a mathematician. And so that was just a wonderful moment to see. Try and move it forward. Okay, so finally, I wanted to talk about my interactions with my students as a teacher. And so I wrote this in September. I said, I don't think I'm having many quality moments with my students during whole group teaching. I think I'm aware of what they're doing, but I can either spend a lot of time with 1 or 2 students or a very short amount of time with a lot of students. And I'm curious to investigate during a 1.5 hour whole group math lesson, how much time do I actually spend conversing with students? And if you're a teacher, you might have kind of a similar reflection that I had there. And so I began to collect data on how many interactions I was having. I first defined what I was looking for. I was looking for a quality interaction, something that was at least 1 full minute of a discussion about the content. And it could be either a question that's asked by myself or a student, or the student explaining what their work represents, but it had to be at least 1 minute. And the data wasn't great. I had 25 students, 24 students in my class, and I was having less than 5 quality interactions every time I recorded the data, which means I really wasn't talking to that many students in a quality way. So I knew I had to change the instructional model. This was during that whole group model that I was doing at the beginning of the year. And so when I did that, when I changed to this self-paced blended model, I began to see a lot more time to interact with students. I wasn't up in front of the class giving a 30-minute lesson. I was walking around for the entire 1.5 hours, and I was Now, the wonderful thing I like about this action research, as you're going to see from all my colleagues later on, is that if you find an answer to a question like I did really quickly, I found a solution, you can then dive deeper into that same question. So now that I kind of knew that more interactions were happening, I said, well, what kind of interactions are happening? Let me dive deeper into what those interactions are. So I began to code my interactions. First, I created a tracker and identified some different interactions that I might see. They might be reteach or explanation. I might be gently pushing a student, or I might be even applying or asking a student to apply their learning to a new situation. And finally, I might even be challenging a student. And then I collected a lot of data. And then I started to code the data. and created a graph. There's so much data here that in this data to see. As steers, out there more. No application of more data interaction on it too. More red. You can remember that as the teacher, see a student is stuck on things. I can tell me about your build upon and gently push instead of reteaching. I'm affirming their identity as a mathematician, and I'm not saying that your identity is worthless. What you have is off from analyzing these interactions. Interaction, being student, and someone who at the start of the year really wanted to talk to more. What's it? Can you explain what you did?
Well, explain what I did, I just did the same thing, up in the board because it has the same like, model and all that. So I saw it was like 4 and 3 each, but since there wasn't like any number to actually show how many fours it had, I just put 0.
Okay. And then what did you start subtracting?
And I started subtracting.
Ask how you got 11 eighths.
I got them each because I broke this down and decomposed it and added a 4 to this one.
Okay, so how did you